Hi, I'm Reed Peterson, and welcome to Grief Refuge. Thanks for listening today and trusting Grief Refuge as a resource to help you manage the thoughts and feelings related to your loss. If this is your first time listening, I welcome you with open arms. And if you've listened before, welcome back. Grief Refuge is about helping you find peace and purpose after loss. This podcast was created with the intention to help validate the thoughts and the feelings related to your grief, to take time to reflect, and to honor your self-care. Here at Grief Refuge, you will learn healthy ways to manage grief. You can also find comfort, hopefulness, and a sense of peace in regards to finding a way to embrace life moving forward. Through the stories and the conversations shared on this podcast, my intention is to provide companionship, insight, and also a soothing voice to help you navigate the heavier, more painful feelings that go hand in hand with grief. Grief is often very hard and very painful. I'm glad you're here, and I promise to do everything I can to provide the best support to you. Before we begin, there's just a little housekeeping to cover. Because of the depth and the nature of this topic, it may be more beneficial to not multitask while you're listening. Instead, I invite you to use this time for your self-care and your personal reflection. Use this time to relax, and use this time to allow your grief-related feelings to run their course. Essentially, use this time to mourn your loss. Also, this podcast publishes episodes twice a month. When you're grieving, that's a lot of time in between each episode. Things can and often do come up, and you actually may feel setbacks, you may feel more confusion, some overwhelm, and other strong emotions that make the experience that much more painful. Because that's a reality that happens, I invite you to download the Grief Refuge app. It's free on your phone's app store, and the Grief Refuge app is this hub for getting more grief support. On the app, you'll find many things such as stories, tips, and guidance for helping to navigate your grief journey. There's also daily messages shared in the form of validation, hope, and comfort to help soothe and comfort you throughout the difficult journey. You can find the Grief Refuge app on your phone's app store by simply searching Grief Refuge. Thank you, and let's move on to today's topic. In grief, some people's hearts are broken so wide open that as they get repaired, their hearts fill with compassion. So much so that the innate desire to help others grows and gets louder and louder until it seems like there's no longer a choice to do something about it. Simply, something must be done to help others. Today's Grief Refuge podcast guest is Sadie Beyl. Sadie's life plans changed forever when her husband Paul died only 3 days before they were scheduled to move from South Africa to Italy. In this interview, Sadie shares parts of her story of loss, her desire to grieve well, and the process of reclaiming her life. She also shares a special announcement for her upcoming Mourning to Light Grief Support Summit. When you listen to the stories of other grievers, you gain perspective on how to reclaim your own life. It all helps to learn how to manage and navigate your grief journey. Enjoy the interview, the conversation, and listen till the very end to get the link to the summit. There will be at least 30 free tools offered to help navigate grief. Hi, everyone. I'm here with Sadie from Mourning to Light, and she's going to provide a grief summit, and it's a very special event, and this is a kind of a bonus episode that I really wanted to share with you because it's time sensitive and it's really important, and I think it's extremely valuable for everyone listening, because if grief is your experience right now and you're in the throes of grief, and I know if you listen to Grief Refuge, you're likely experiencing that you have another available resource that is going to provide some insight, some perspective, some tips, many other things. I'm sure Sadie will share more about it, but we're going to dive into what this all means about this Mourning to Light Summit. Sadie, thank you so much for being a part of Grief Refuge.
Thank you for asking me, Reed. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Let's start with you for a brief second, Sadie. You have what sounds to me like a unique accent. Can you share a little bit about where in the world you reside and maybe a little bit about where you grew up?
Okay, I'll start at the beginning. I was born in London to a Dutch mother and a Londoner father who was a civil engineer, and he got a job on the gold mines in South Africa, in Johannesburg, when I was around 3 or 4 years old. So the whole family immigrated to South Africa, which was meant to be for a year or two. And I grew up there, went to school, got my architecture degree, met my husband, fell in love, and we moved to Cape Town, where we started an architectural practice. And long story short, after he passed away, I moved to Italy. So I live in Italy now.
Now, in your own words, would you say that there's a little bit of Italian influence to your accent?
At the moment, I'm not sure. I speak Italian with a terrible accent. When I hear myself speaking, I just want to sink because I don't sound as lyrical as they do. You know, Italian is so musical. I wish I could speak it like a native, but maybe it's rubbed off a little. I'm not sure.
Yeah, what I was getting at was like when I listen to you speak English, I hear a lot of South African, and I also hear almost like a twinge of Italian. And
Wow.
so yeah, I was just wondering, like, as far as moving to Italy and living there, if it's had an impact on the way you speak English or not, from your own words. It's always, I don't know. I remember once being in New Zealand and all the kids, I was there for an education program, and all the kids had told me, "Oh, I love your accent," and I kind of scratched my head at the time because I was in my young 20s and naive and whatever. And I was like, my accent, because perception's reality. And I was like, well, you're the ones who have the accent. And I was just like, wait a minute, like I'm on their turf. And so looking back on it, I was like, oh, I wonder, I was there only a short time. It was about 3 months, but I came back to the States wondering if, oh, are Americans going to think that I sound a little Kiwi? But I didn't really get that.
Yeah. I think
Anyway,
I
so
only speak Italian, Reed. I very seldom speak English. I am only online when I have calls with people do I speak English.
well, that makes sense. Yeah, it's the world around you is also the world you live in, and how needed is it to connect with people online and reach all the far corners of the globe? It sounds like you're very worldly experienced.
Thank you.
So we're gonna take just like a dive off a cliff into a transition. And so speaking of worldly experience, I know just a snippet about your experience with grief, and it's sounds like it's, for lack of a better term, correct me if you have a better one, it's motivated you to want to provide some sources of support for others. Sadie, tell us about this Mourning to Light Summit and what your intention is to provide for people that are grieving.
Okay, I'll give you a little bit of background. Being a professional architect, and my husband was too, we closed our architectural practice to move to Italy. And he passed away 3 days before we were due to leave and make that big move. And eventually, I stayed in South Africa to try and gather my wits after he'd passed on. And I came here, but I was very lonely. I couldn't speak Italian very well when I first arrived, although I made lots of beautiful, well-meaning friends. Communication was a bit of a struggle, and I was lonely. So I went online and I joined a few Facebook groups for people who were going through grief. And in these groups, it broke my heart to read these people's stories. And I was doing okay in that I was meditating, practicing yoga, getting out into nature, hugging trees. I was just on a mission to be well in my grief, to grieve well, I suppose you could say. And I started reaching out and commenting and trying to help people. And I found I wasn't touching sides. So I started my own Facebook page. It's called How to Let the Light In When You're Grieving. And I kept trying to direct people there because I've posted videos on simple breathing techniques, mindfulness techniques, just little tools to help people. But I got expelled from one or two of the groups because they felt I was soliciting, but it was all for free and it was all done from an open heart. I wasn't doing it with any end in mind. And I ended up on a free webinar where this woman, Shanda Sumter, started to speak about how to build an email list. And I'd since put together a course to help people, but I had no one to market it to. I didn't know how to market it. And her course looked like a brilliant opportunity to be able to reach out to more people more quickly. And part of that course is hosting an online event. And I know absolutely, well, I know a bit now, but at the time I just signed up knowing nothing and being quite at a disadvantage with the technology of how the whole thing worked. But I just felt so guided, Reed, and I just took this huge leap of faith and I just felt called to help people. In fact, the call got louder and louder. You know, when your intuition starts screaming at you, I felt I didn't have a choice. And so here we are.
Well, you just answered my question because as you shared pieces of this story, I could just tell that intention to help is so strong. And so I was going to ask you, where do you think that came from? But now you're speaking it of as an intuition and a calling, and it's literally screaming at you of like, hey, put yourself out there and provide some assistance and support and resources and help to people in need. So can I ask you though, as far as the loss of your husband and the experience you had of staying in South Africa before moving to Italy, did someone show up in your life as a source of hope or a source of inspiration or help or support?
Wow, Reed. Well, that gets to the nub of the whole story. The first help that happened was my very good friend's husband was with me at the hospital that we eventually ended up with after the motorcycle accident. And the young intern came out and told me that Paul hadn't made it. And my friend just put his arms around me. He's a very big man. And he said to me, breathe, Sadie, breathe. And I gasped. I didn't realize I'd held my breath. And I've put this in my course. I think a lot of people hold their breath. And in the months afterwards, I just kept musing on why do I keep holding my breath? I would become very aware of it because I've practiced breath work before my husband passed. And it's because I didn't want time to move forward. I didn't want time to take me away from the last time that I'd seen him alive. I was trying to stop time, literally, Reed. That's what I was doing when I held my breath. And when I realized that, it was a huge realization, I could breathe again. And I realized I had to let go of control and the guilt of, oh, if only I'd stopped him going on the bike that day. I felt strange all day. Why didn't I say something? All those like I could have, and I realized no, I'm not in control of time, and I'm most certainly not in control of life and death. And those two realizations were huge, and they happened while I was still in South Africa.
Yeah, so putting myself in your shoes and only projecting, and I'm owning that, Sadie, I can totally hear how important and valuable those huge insights were to your grief journey, your healing experience. And I agree with you. I often advise or counsel, I don't know the right words, but help people remember to breathe, not just to inhale, but to exhale almost twice as long as they do inhaling, because in the exhale is actually metaphorical for the letting go experience. And so it moves me, it touches my heart to hear that you had that awareness rather quickly in your grief experience, because is it universal? I don't know, but yes, every human breathes. So having that awareness and that insight is critically important into feeling human, feeling hopeful, and feeling like there's life after loss of someone so important in your life. So thank you for sharing that, Sadie. And so these tools that have kind of been developed in your back pocket, metaphorically again, and also the insights that you just shared, are these experiences that are going to be taught to people who attend your summit?
No, because I'm hosting the summit. So the myriad of speakers, and we've chosen experts and writers and people who write poetry, people who work with trauma in the body, people who work with meditation, mindfulness specialists. So people who've lost loved ones through accident, cancer, suicide. So I've tried to get as many diverse people as I could to come on this event, because everyone's experience is unique and everyone has experienced it differently to me. So this event is not about my journey. This is about reaching out with tools, because I have asked every speaker to give some practical advice or some tool or offer a gift to help people who are grieving to go through their journey with something. So no, my course is about my journey and the lessons I learned. But that's another thing for another day. The event is about others. It's about serving others.
Wonderful. Yeah. So in service, is there, I guess I'm projecting again, so let me ask for clarification. Is there going to be an emphasis on education for the grieving person, or narratives such as stories? Like, I know that all this diverse panel of experts are going to share their experiences, but like, is there a honed in kind of core element to the energy of the experience of the summit?
Well, I haven't tried to focus it too much, because people have different beliefs. So there are those that are very religious and they believe in God and they read the Bible, and there are those people, and then there are other people who are a bit more open with their beliefs. So they believe in God, but they have a more woo-woo experience, I suppose, a more spiritual, less religious based connection with God. And then there are those who are atheists, there are those who are agnostic, there are those who are Jewish, Christian. You know, there's just so many belief systems, and I don't want to pin people down. I want them to learn through the stories of others, because that's how I learn. I learn through the experience of others and examples. If you have to start citing facts to me and I need to parrot them back to you, that's not how my brain works. I'm more creative, and I remember pictures and colors, and I experience space and sound and music. And so I'm coming from my perspective of stories teach us. And that is rooted in a few months after Paul died, I went on a road trip all by myself. I had a little Fiat 500 cabriolet with a soft top roof that came down. And I just put my sunglasses on, put the music on loud, climbed in the car, and just went on this road trip. And I had a few Reiki sessions before to try and help with the grief in my body, because it wasn't in my brain. Talk therapy wasn't helping me. Talking to people wasn't helping me. So I had to work on a different level. I'm different than most people, I think. And in one of the Reiki sessions, the beautiful woman, she was such a gentle, loving soul, said to me, Paul's guides are here, she said, and they are telling me that you need to go to the forests, where the forests are, and there is someone you'll meet there, and that person will help you. And then after the session, I said to her, what was that all about? She said, Sadie, I've never had guides visit me ever. I just do Reiki. She said, that was a first for me, but it came through so strongly. So that was the impetus for the trip. And when I finally got to the forests, there's a beautiful place in South Africa called the Garden Route. And there are beautiful old indigenous forests there. And when I arrived, I booked an Airbnb. I just booked it online. You know, when you're grieving, your prefrontal cortex is all shut down. So I wasn't thinking very clearly. And I couldn't think logically. So I saw the first one that looked nice. There were a lot of trees. I booked it. And when I got there, the woman introduced herself, described a bit about the little Airbnb, and then explained her husband had just died a few years previously. And it just hit me like a clarion bell. I was like, oh, here's someone who's been through it. And we became friends, and we spent hours talking. And she told me about her grief journey, and I could see that she was okay 5 years later. And that gave me the biggest hope, Reed. I looked at her and I thought, oh, okay, my life can turn out well. I can make a life for myself. It's going to be okay. If her life's okay, I can do it too. And that was the first step on reclaiming my life.
For me, as a listener to that, it's absolutely beautiful. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing it. To me, I sense that it has some sacredness to it. It has some authenticity, of course. And it's just something extra special that I think adds so much hope to everybody listening. So thank you for sharing that, Sadie. And also thank you for explaining how the From Mourning to Light Summit has the power of story in itself, from all the experts and the presenters, to be able to address the diversity of the people that will attend. Let's circle back to that summit. What are some logistics of it? When does it begin?
Okay, the summit starts on the 28th of April. We'll start off with one interview with a very well-known master coach. His name is David Essel, and he was very interesting to interview. I saw him on another summit. A friend put up a summit about health and mindset. And when David Essel spoke, I happened to be watching at the time, he mentioned that his parents had recently passed. But then he went on and he was in the theme of that summit. And that just stuck with me. So I contacted my friend. I said, do you mind if I reach out to David Essel? I said, I won't be treading on your toes. I'm really interested to hear his experience, because he's known as the leader of the positive thinking movement. So I was interested to know how his journey went. How do you balance this positive thinking and grief, which seem to be at two opposite ends of the spectrum? And we had an amazing interview. And he told me that he'd written a course to help people who were grieving. And he said, Sadie, since my parents have died, we are rewriting the whole thing. So grief changes you. It opens your heart, and it puts you in a different place in your life. And everyone thinks grief is so devastating, and it is. I'll never say it isn't. But if you can move through your journey with dignity and openness, you're going to land in a beautiful place, because you understand compassion. And that's why I think so many people who've experienced devastating grief end up serving, like you, like me, like David Essel.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. So the summit starts on the 28th. And how long is the summit, Sadie?
Thanks for bringing me back. I got so wrapped up in my story, I forgot about the logistics. Okay, I'll just speak about the details. Starts on the 28th. It runs for 15 consecutive days. The first day is David Essel, just the one speaker. On the subsequent days, we'll have 2 speakers. We have a bonus speaker who is Roshi Joan Halifax. She didn't want to publicize the event. She didn't want to do anything except just be interviewed and just gift me her presence for 30 minutes, which I am so grateful for. And people will be able to watch the series. I think it'll be available for the whole time that the series is on, and then it will disappear. But if people would like to pay a small upgrade, then we'll send them the recordings, and they can keep them forever. So they can watch them at their leisure, or rewatch them, or show them to their friends. So that's the basic format. Every speaker will offer a free gift, and that's where the tools come in. So the audience, if they happen to watch that particular episode, will get the link to the free gift, and then they will either get a little booklet or some self-care tips, or depending on what each speaker offers. David Essel offered a free course on his website, which is amazing. So that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. One last question. What's the
Yes.
price?
No, it's free. It's for free. I want to reach as many people as possible, and there's absolutely no price. The only cost for the upgrade, if you'd like to keep the videos, is $47, which is not a lot of money.
I tell you what, Sadie, it's tremendous value for the amount of tools and resources and conversations just to help someone feel the source of hope and the source of healing in their life. Because I'm assuming, yes, I own that, but a lot of the people that will be attending are feeling a lot of hurt and are feeling a lot of pain. So I told you once before that I think the name is beautiful, and I think that it's spot on for the metaphor of what people really are wanting in their lives. You know, they want to understand that although grief is hard and they need to mourn, mourning is the expression of their thoughts and feelings for grief, that they can find that source of light and source of feeling like, oh, life can happen, integrating the loss of my loved one and also living with purpose again. So Sadie, I am so excited for this event to happen. I'll be sharing the URL to sign up post the interview. Well, looking forward to connecting with you in regards to the summit. And thank you for being a part of Grief Refuge.
Thank you, Reed. Thank you for agreeing to be on the summit. And thank you so much for this podcast. I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you so much for listening to the full interview. To learn more about the summit and to sign up, visit Sadie's Facebook page, which is titled How to Let the Light In When You're Grieving. So simply search How to Let the Light In When You're Grieving on Facebook and you'll find it. I'm deeply grateful for your trust in Grief Refuge and our mission. We help the grieving find peace and purpose after loss. This is important work, and although painful at times, it's necessary for helping to heal your heart, mind, and soul. You can get more stories, guidance, insights, and more grief support on the Grief Refuge app, which I hope you download and access from your phone's app store now. Thank you, take care, keep honoring your grief, be kind to yourself, and talk to you soon.